apologize in advance for my bad English pronunciation. Dear friends who welcome in Brindisi City, I would like to express my gratitude of the city for having organized in Brindisi the Supranational Democracy Dialogue. Brindisi is an hospitable city and has been awarded by UNESCO of the title of Port of Peace and Reception. So, it's with extreme joy that we welcome your conference aimed to the construction of peaceful coexistence and on the problems of global governance of democracy. We have long been engaged in the construction path of bridges with all European and Mediterranean countries, which we feel as our brothers in the common interest for peace in Mare Nostrum, the Mediterranean Sea. Furthermore, we intend to propose our candidacy for the Italian Capital of Culture 2027 in name of our role of Porta del Mediterraneo and also in name of the territory massively interested in the phenomenon of the ecological energy and digital transition that ask many serious questions about the relationship between democracy and technology. For these reasons, we will mobilize all our human and social capital to face the problems of our future with seriousness and competence. I finish this small greeting intervention on behalf of the city that hosts you, wishing you an excellent job that we will follow and also appreciate for the future of peace in the world.
Thank you very much, Mayor Marchion. And we are very pleased to open this sixth edition of the Supranational Democracy Dialogue. And it's an honor for me to welcome all of you on behalf of Università del Salento and of the two departments who organized this event, the Legal Science Department and Department of Social and Human Sciences. I'm very pleased to have now two very, very important greetings. The greetings by the UNGSC, United Nations General Service Center, and so the liaison officer, Maria D'Aprile, and the greetings of Marty Grau from the Maison Jean Monnet in Paris, who is remotely connected with us, and we are very proud of being partnered with Maison Jean Monnet as well as UNGSC. So you see, ok, salutiamo il sindaco, grazie ancora. And so we start under the very important auspices of these two important institutions. So Maria, if you want to join me, I will be happy to give you the floor.
Good morning, everyone. I feel honored to be here today. And thank you to the organizers of this important event. It is an important event, first of all. Before I introduce myself, allow me to extend to you all the warmest greetings and the best wishes for every success from the director of the United Nations Global Service Center, Miss Giovanna Ceglia. She cannot be here today, but there is some kind of legacy from her, from her base, okay? Here, I work for the UN, and I've worked for the UN for the past 30 years. Basically, I was really a young girl at the onset of my working career. And I've always worked for the biggest international organization in support of peace. Furthermore, as a head of a liaison and protocol, I had the privilege also to take part in many dialogues on peace, be them like tactical discussions with our host country, or a strategic conversation on future challenges and opportunities triggered from the presence of the UN base in this strategic corner of the world at the center of the Mediterranean Sea. What impressed me most is the fact that the more we talk with the people, the more I realize the need to pursue that dialogue, directly or indirectly connected with the big theme of a new culture founded on global peace. So we all need...
Yeah.
Can I kindly ask you to mute your mics? Thank you. Okay, so I was saying that we all need to feel part of the creation of a new global governance, which in its ambition, it is already, the co-creation itself is indeed the new democratic paradigm. So if this forum aims at building active citizenship in the international sphere beyond borders, then this forum has already achieved in part its goal. Why do I say in part? Because really the other part, and probably also the most important one, is to be able to have an impact in the global society. We know that human beings can impact on reality only when they organize themselves in communities, because communities share a sense of a belonging based on a set of values, which is their patrimony of values. So today we are a community, I would say well known as international hub, focused on building the narrative on peace and international cooperation. Doing this in this city, which is also very well known for being the home of the United Nations for over 30 years now, and which in about 1 month is also receiving the visit of the G7, cannot be a mere coincidence. It cannot be a chance. There must be a reason why all this is happening here. Last week, I accompanied a group of students of Unisalento for a trip to one of our UN missions in Kosovo, in Pristina. Kosovo, the UN mission there plays a critical role in promoting intercommunity trust building. Kosovo is a beautiful place, and people are gentle and welcoming. There is one thing that struck me. While we were walking in the streets of Mitrovica, a man had gathered a group of people in the main square, and they were all trying to paint beauty. Why? He said, I try to convince my citizens that there are 97 things on which we can agree. And I want to start to talk and I have a conversation with them about these 97 things, because on the other, on which we cannot concur, then we can discuss later. So it was doing simply what was in his control to do, basically. But he was doing that with the determination, first of all, and he was doing that with the outrage about whatever can threaten the harmony of this multi-ethnic society. So I thought that this is what we lost along the way. That was my thought while I was talking to him. We lost the determination, and we lost also that feeling of outrage for whatever threatens the culture of peace. So I hope that, this forum is able and can be able to really have an impact through the recovery of these dimensions and these feelings. Buon lavoro a tutti. Grazie.
Thank you so much, Maria, really. And you have supported us since the first edition, and we don't forget that. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Marti Grausegu, who talks to us from the Jean Monnet House in near Paris, where we have also had the pleasure of being invited 1 year ago with a group of students. It was a marvelous experience. And since then, we have established a cooperation, and we hope to bring this to new and bigger stages. But at the moment, the Jean Monnet House is also a partner of this event. So for this, I thank Marti, and I'm happy to give him the floor. You can unmute you, Marti.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It is really a pleasure, great pleasure for me to be again part of this important conference. Un saluto anche molto speciale alle autorità presenti, ai professori, ai colleghi con cui ci siamo incontrati l'anno scorso e con cui, come la professoressa Susanna Cafaro ha accennato adesso, con cui siamo rimasti in contatto anche per tutto questo anno, per tanti progetti di collaborazione e tante strade di lavoro comune che abbiamo per il futuro. I'm going to speak in English, obviously, because this is a multilingual event. I think, as far as I'm concerned, I discovered this important annual meeting of supranational democracy, and I've been convinced since that this is the place to be to discuss on the topic on supranational democracy. I think it is pretty impressive, the array of contributions, the interdisciplinary approach that the organizers have managed to put together throughout the years. In my case, well, I'm a political scientist. I'm a historian. I'm both, and I'm also a curator and head of the European Parliament Service at the Jean Monnet House. So my approach necessarily is influenced by both, by history, but also by this, let's say, political science part of me, with an accent to international relations, multilateralism, etc. So for me, from a personal level, it is a very fitting topic as well. I would like to make two main points in this initial presentation of this year's conference. One is about to tell you a little bit about the Jean Monnet House, but also why with the Supranational Dialogue Conference we have established such a close cooperation. Well, the Jean Monnet House is where the first text, the founding text of the European communities was drafted. So for those who are already initiated, our visitors already initiated in the matters, they tend to think that, well, Monnet, he was important because in 1950 there was this important moment, but it is our job to show them, even to the initiated ones, that that's not it, that there's much more to that. And basically the rest of the explanation of the experience of our visitors, of the participants in our events, is to realize to what extent Monnet was instrumental throughout all his life in precisely setting up supranational democracy. At the very beginning, of course, the first half of his life, he was not thinking in those terms. He was thinking more as a cognac merchant that he was from starters. You know, he was a very down-to-earth individual. His initial preoccupation was just to make sure that people would work together, so that to identify general interests and just to make sure that people at different instances they were working together. But quite early, he was also he was given a position that again is very central to our topic. He became at the age 30, and with this background again completely nothing to do with political career initially. He became Deputy Secretary General of the League of Nations. So here we are in a dimension very central to our topic. So from that position, we can say that Monet was very instrumental in the interwar period in what is today a little bit the prehistory of the United Nations system, etc., etc. But our house, our Jean Monnet house here, for that reason and for what happened later, can be seen not just as the birthing place of the United Communities, not just that, but as the birthing place of many, many other instances of the international system of the world multilateralism. And that's because of one particularity that Monet had with him. He had this tendency, or I would say an invariable tendency to efface himself, to erase himself. He never wanted to take the first role. He always wanted to be in the backstage because he knew that would, if he was personally attacked, that would undermine the very cause that he was serving. So the solution was just to send other people, to recommend other people to occupy the first positions in the main international organizations that were being created, etc. And most of that happened, as far as Jean Monnet is concerned, happened in his house here in Rouge-Jarret, near Paris, 45 minutes from Paris. So examples, like Robert Marjolin was sent to be the leader of OECD in the late 40s. René Pleven, long-time assistant of Monet, became Prime Minister of France and proposed the European Defence Community, intended as the second step of the European communities. Etienne Hirsch became one of the authors of the Declaration, authors, became the leader of the European Community for Atomic Energy. Paul-Henri Spaak, having been president of the Council of Europe Assembly, of NATO, United Nations General Assembly, was also, let's say, kind of like recruited by Jean Monnet to be the first president of the Common Assembly of the Poland Steel Community, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, we see our modest house, because it's after all a modest construction, modest building, as the focal point of the origin of many, many of the components of today's multilateralism, and more importantly so, of instances that have an active role in putting forward supranational democracy, not just creation, but also mechanisms of international deliberation and of international democratic legitimacy. Second point, and I will try to wrap up. Since last year in Brindisi, I was there. I had the task right after the conference, which was to create a whole exhibition on the history of European elections, an exhibition that it was intended to be shown in Brussels, and now it is shown in Brussels at the Parliamentarium, at the center visitor of the European Parliament, and it is quite a substantial exhibition with objects, with movies, not just like photos and text, but very much a live exhibition. And for me, as I had this task, it was of the experience of having been in Brindisi, like, gave me a lot of food for thought for this exhibition, and basically because it got me to reflect even further about the foundations of supranational democracy. And throughout this effort that we have done also to flesh out all the narrative for the upcoming European elections in June, I came to realize also, and that is sort of like present in the exhibition, that we could see supranational democracy as a sequence of combats in European societies, and not just to improve the quality of democracy. So what I'm saying is that since the 18th century, 19th century, there was no real progress in democracy for as long societies were not dealing with some impasses, with some social causes that were unresolved. First of all, abolition of slavery, of course, full right for women, extension of the right to vote to all individuals, not just part of individuals. So, of course, for as long societies didn't resolve that, we cannot talk in retrospect of a real democracy, of a true democracy, today's standards. Well, I do think, this is maybe a very personal, I don't know, but I do think that supranational democracy can be inscribed in this sequence of like bettering the nature of democracy, because in a way it's a return to the roots, to the very roots of democracy, even in the 17th century, 18th century, when of course it was not in existence at all. It was only in the head of a very few individuals, philosophers, who started thinking about what it would be to oppose absolutism, absolute power, etc. And those individuals, completely alone, started thinking about a kind of universal brotherhood or fraternity that would be based on democratic links, but across borders. So, of course, they didn't conceive that like democracy in one country, or even from a theoretical point of view, which is what we're talking about. They thought about possible future movement that would span across borders, because otherwise it was not making sense to them. So, in a way, our topic of discussion is also going back to the roots of radical democratic thought. That's one of the points that I wanted to make today. Well, I've talked long enough, so all the best for this new rendezvous, and I hope to hear about the outcome of this of the debate today. And of course, we remain completely available to all of you to make this discussion strive further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marty, for your welcome, your support, and your contribution to the conversation. And now we enter into the topic of this year. And I will take just, I think, 10 minutes to introduce the topic, and then we will move to the first session. So our two speakers gave already the flavor of this event, because we had, after the greetings of the mayor, we had the global dimension with Maria, and the European dimension with Marti. And so the importance of values in both the contributions, and the importance of values to build peace. And in this moment, we think this is the topic. And this is why we decided to call this edition Shared Values and Global Governance for Peace and Sustainable Development. Of course, we know that peace and sustainable development are two interlinked concepts, because peace cannot exist without sustainability in economic conditions, inequality of rights, and inequality of welfare, and in a collaborative environment. And so, as this event turns 6, I have to thank many of you for helping this event, growing it every year. I want to underline that we decided this year to ground this event on the founding values or founding principles of the European Union, not because they are of the European Union, but because they, in a certain sense, summarize what are our shared founding values. I mean, the value of peace and solidarity, the value of the rule of law, the value, most of all, of human dignity and fundamental rights, the value of collaboration and support for multilateralism and international law. So these values are clearly stated in Article 2 and 3 of the treaty establishing the European Union, the 2 as the article of the values and the 3 as the article of the goals, putting at the first place among the goals peace and values, as stated above. And Article 21, which is the basic article of external relations of the Union, which is the article stating that the Union should project on the global sphere its own internal values. Now, why talking about values together with peace and in a context of war and peace? Because I think as Marty, who is an historian, has already somehow introduced the topic, because the European Union as European community was born in the war and was the result of war. And I will just mention briefly two of my favorite historical figures from this history, Altiero Spinelli and Jean Monnet, two different men who approached this topic from different angles, but very synergic, I think, ones. Spinelli as a political activist, and we have here many activists, and Jean Monnet as an official, and we have here officials as well, because there are many ways to build peace, and we need synergies between different approaches and different people and different backgrounds. So I will mention just two basic documents. One of them being the Ventotene Manifesto, that was wrote in 1941 by Altiero Spinelli, Ernesto Rossi, and Eugenio Colorni, three men all confined to the little island of Ventotene as political dissidents. And so it was sort of open-air prison for them. They were forbidden to meet and to write and to produce any intellectual output, but they were able, without being discovered, to write this manifesto, which is a manifesto for a united and free Europe. And they imagined, in the midst of war, in the very middle of war, the united Europe as a solution, because their point of view on being, in a certain sense, outside the world, in this place out of the world, in the middle of the sea, this little island, they imagined a world without nationalism, because their approach was the nationalism is at the roots of wars, because it is at the roots of this vision that our nation is better than other nations, and we can call it how we want. We can call it authoritarianism, dictatorship, extreme right, left, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if nationalism is there, there is this sense of superiority allowing or legitimizing the aggression on other people, on other countries. And so the manifesto is an anti-nationalist manifesto, stating in a moment when many countries were dissolved by the occupation of the Nazi regime or were under attack by the same, they stated that it would be a pity to rebuild the world as it was before. We should build a different one, a world where there are already common structures. They imagine federal structures, so common parliaments, court of justice, rule of law, and we are back to values, where people will discuss instead of let the weapons talk for them. And so this was written during the war. And so when people ask me, but why you talk of supranational democracy when the world seems to go all in another direction, I just mentioned Ventotene Manifesto, because it's in the difficult times that you have to look after and look for solutions. The second document, which is not less important, maybe from a factual point of view is more important, is the Schuman Declaration 1950. The Schuman Declaration was basically written by Jean Monnet, or mostly by Jean Monnet, who was during the war an officer, so a man who lived the war. And he experimented this idea of having shared office with the allies to buy things together, to buy weapons, to be a common bloc in order to collaborate and overcome the competition, even among allies. And he brought this experience to the founding of the coal and steel community. In a moment when there was still a hot border between Germany and France, he suggested to create the coal and steel community as a place to collaborate. And the idea behind it was creating a common legal framework. And now as a legal mind, let's say, I love this idea that law can be used to build bridges and to negotiate peaceful solutions instead of litigate, because most people associate law with litigation. No, law is also the tool to build bridges. And in this founding treaty of the European Coal and Steel Community, we find a common parliament, a common court of justice, and a set of rules which were intended to open the market of coal and steel, which were strategic sources in times of war, as in times of peace, with the non-discrimination principle. So everybody could buy these resources from wherever at the same conditions. So it was not anymore so relevant having them inside or outside its own borders. And this, in the Jean Monnet Declaration, with the, sorry for the lapsus, in the Schuman Declaration, which is pronounced by the Foreign Affairs Minister of France in 1950 as a proposal to Germany first, but also to other interested countries, the idea was we will put together these resources and create a common authority, not an international authority, but a common one. And so we have the seed of supranationality there. As well, we have the seeds of supranationality in the idea of a European and World Federation in the Ventotene Manifesto, because people won't need anymore to make war, because they will learn to cooperate, building step by step a solidarity de facto. And this is all the difference between having no war and building peace. Because peace is not just the absence of war, peace is creating the conditions for having alternatives to war and working together in order to overcome these being enemies, former enemies, and even become collaborators, friends, and we know that in Europe we have the Erasmus project, we have free circulation of people. We don't see anymore each other as enemies. And this is the real pacification, being not anymore enemies, not just not having war. And so this first session is about Europe, but the next one will be about the world, because the idea is how this formula can work in the other hot areas of the world or in the global dimension to build lasting peace, creating a collaborative approach instead of a competitive one. So I wouldn't say this is the lesson of Europe to the world, because the Europe as it is now is not perceived as an authority, a moral authority more than anything else. But I think that the founding fathers and the founding principles, then they have some kind of moral authority still now, because there we find a real lesson for peace. So I stop here, and I'm very happy to open the floor, giving the floor to my colleague and very dear supporter in all this adventure of the Supranational Democracy Dialogue, Claudia Morini, professor with me at Università del Salento. And so the panelists of the first session can take the place here at the table.
Thank you, Susanna. I kindly invite the panelists of the first session to join me. Don't let me all alone, please. Come, don't be shy. Whatever you want. Just a few minutes for organizational stuff. Yes, they are opening. So once again, good morning to everyone and welcome to this very important event. I know that someone has already underlined the relevance of this journey that we all are in, and I strongly believe that it is never enough to recall the power of dialogue. That is the main feature, I think, of this event, because you have the word dialogue in the name itself of the event. We are now in a supranational democracy dialogue, and also we are here to facilitate a dialogue among scholar, activists, civil society, creative thinker. I'm not a creative thinker, but there are among us creative thinkers. And I'm very grateful to Susanna Cafaro for involving me in this dream. I would call it a dream. It's not only a project, it's not only a very valuable academic event, it's a dream to building bridges. That's what she has just said. That's what we are trying to do in these years. We are building bridges among different disciplines, among different cultures and different backgrounds. We are legal practitioners. Today we have sociologists, but we have also had anthropologists, psychologists, or also technicians, so engineer, ICT specialists. So it's a truly open-minded event. And the title of this first session is very important. We are going to talk about the founding principles of the European Union and their global impact. So starting from the EU point of view, from EU's values, this morning we will try to evaluate the impact of these values. What we have to focus on is that scrolling the titles of your contributions today, I have underlined some keywords. For instance, betrayed, pressure, loss, threat. They may have a sort of negative connotation in itself. They have, in my view, a negative connotation. So they are the expression, I think, of a feeling of a fear, a feeling of danger that we all are experiencing in those days. The war is all around us. It's no longer only on our eastern border. Now it has spread also in the Mediterranean with a very huge impact on the lives of so many people. And we have to take into account this. That's why I think the negative connotation is in a way justified. But looking at the last intervention, there is a word that, in my view, can open us to hope. And it is the word solidarity. Because if we think about the founding values that Susanna has already mentioned, and I'm not going to repeat them, we can also think that thanks to solidarity among member states, first of all, but also among a worldwide solidarity, so among the EU and all the other international actors, not only foreign states, but also other international organizations such as the UN, we can in a way overcome these tough times. So solidarity is a word of hope, but it's also a concrete instrument that we have to react. But now, I've talked a lot, but if Susanna has honored me with this role of chairing this first panel, she was aware that I used to talk. Now, you have 20 minutes, okay? I will be very strict. I'm just back from Switzerland, and I've learned how to be strict. And we will begin this session with Massimo Pendenza. Massimo is a full professor of sociology and is director of the Center for European Studies. So we have a sociologist that is very, very skilled with EU stuff. So we are looking forward to listen to your perspective into this issue. And the title of his presentation is "The Future That Europe Has Left Behind. Has the Europe's cosmopolitan normative vision be betrayed?" So the floor is yours, Massimo. You can use that mic and then share. Yeah? Teams? Okay, I will assist you, okay? No. Yeah. I'm closing this. Avoid confusion. We are sharing this, the slides, so the future of Europe. Here we are.
Ok, ce l'abbiamo fatta. We did it. It's okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you. And let me say just a word to thanks to Professoressa Susanna Cafaro for inviting me this important event to discuss on Europe, on shared values, on fundamental principles. And I'm quite honored to be, I know, because she told me, the first sociologist, and Paulina, that we are together in this event, not just all the events, six. So I'm quite worried about this because sociologists are new in this event. So I beg your pardon because I will read my presentation just to be more precise, and I will read slowly, and I will use a slide to help everybody to understand my presentation. So, the aim of my presentation is to argue, put the second slide, the aim of my presentation is to argue the thesis of the betrayal of Europe's cosmopolitan normative vision. This is my label, founded on the recognition of human dignity. A vision, this cosmopolitan normative vision, that Europe seems to have left behind, that, however, could be reconsidered for the survival of her future, we hope. What I intend to discuss is that Europe has both historical and normative characteristics of a cosmopolitan nature. But at the same time, she is also moving, due to the current economic, financial, and immigration crisis, in the direction of a market-based society, lacking an internal or external solidarity. In particular, I intend to develop the following three arguments. One, that Europe can be considered a more specific historical space of potential affirmation of cosmopolitan normative vision compared, for example, just an example, to that of the United States. I will compare these two areas. Two, second argument, that such cosmopolitan normative vision can be found in the articles of our constitutional treaties and the Charter of European Fundamental Rights. Third argument, that what I consider the betrayal of such vision has been provoked by the merging of an alternative one I define as market cosmopolitanism. Two phases, clash of cosmopolitanism. In effect, in the European Union, official documents, there are virtually no traces of the term cosmopolitanism. There is not a term of a charter. Nor is it mentioned in official European public discourses, despite the undeniable evidence of certain elements. In this respect, the European Union advocates the universal application of human rights and individual protection in her various institutions, and that is why many scholars, for example, Jan Manners, have defined the European Union as civil power or a normative power. I prefer this second level, normative power. In other words, with its specific effective cosmopolitan principles, the European Union has appeased relations between its members and achieved Kant's long-awaited perpetual peace. In this context, there are many who hope that today's Europe will have an identical role in the world in a global scale. Returning to my three arguments. The first step is to explain why Europe is a potential space of cosmopolitanism compared to the United States. Undeniable, the roots of both are the same, but the European political space differs from that of the United States in at last three respects. A, B, C. A, the relations with the enemy. B, the relation between capitalism and democracy. And C, the building of Europe, including the drafting of the constitutional treaty. With regard to the first, this deals with the outcomes of the war and the representation of the enemy. This is a quite philosophical political. For cultural and territorial reasons, if we exclude the Civil War, the United States has never been obliged to fight endogenous enemies. This has determined a border culture which transmits even today a widespread sense of justified suppression of the enemy and an unlimited psycho-geographical expansionism of the American way of life. In contrast, also here with some exception, Crusaders, Holocaust, colonization, the historical experiences of wars in Europe have taught us above all about the changing face as well as the non-eliminability of the enemy, which must be reckoned with always and in an event. For example, the Franco-German axis after the Second War. Today you are my enemy, tomorrow you are my friend. However, if we shift the difference between Europe and the United States onto a global plane, whereby borders tend to expand and merge just as Americans expand and overcomes our borders, Europe tends to transform Earth into crossable boundaries, limen in Latin, not limes. At this point, we might well ask, which of the two approaches more closely the cosmopolitan ideal? The second element, the relation between capitalism and democracy, links European history to the particular relation it has with capitalism, democracy, and welfare. While in Europe the relation between democracy and capitalism has always been distinguished by a certain tension, giving rise to open conflict at times, in the United States it has generally been translated in their coexistence, inspired by the social doctrine of the Church, by socialism and by social democracy. Europe has always considered capitalism more a price to pay for the establishing of democracy rather than an element of human development. It's changing this. Here the question arises. Why not grasp the inequivocable fact that the European Union, more so than the United States, is the ideal humus for the spirit of cosmopolitanism? Third element, I think, is the more important one. The third element examines and compares the two respective modes of institutional governance. While the American Constitution is an institutive act of an already defined political reality, the European Constitution is still in its embryo stage. At first sight, Europe has still far to go to equal the modus operandi characterizing the Constitution worldwide. Yet, what we notice is that the limits of Europe's Constitution are also its strength. From a different perspective, we cannot help but see that what the European Constitution is achieving, albeit with difficulty, is the blueprint of a global post-national political order and the first attempt in the world to split what modernity has grouped together and what globalization has put in turmoil. The European Union, it has to be said, is an open project, the borders of which have not yet been defined. This means welcoming anyone who wishes to become part of the great European family, sharing its values, but above all, accepting participation in the cosmopolitan project of governance and voluntary inclusion that has no equal in the world. It's a laboratory. Europe is a laboratory. In short, we can sum up this argument. Also, for many political and bureaucratic elites, Europe is definitely not a cosmopolitan vision, because of the documents. It is my conviction that Europe's Infieri project for constitutional unity represents a particular social space grounded in cosmopolitan experiences and elected to an institutional project of a cosmopolitan kind. Second argument. This leads us to my second argument. The above characteristics are key to European normative cosmopolitan identity. For some time now, the European community has advocated the universal application of human rights and individual protection in its various institutions, and a subscript to democracy and human rights as a basic criterion for membership. Candidate states have to have a democratic constitution and respect the principles of the rules of law and human rights. These conditions may be considered ambivalent, because they are ambivalent, and the mechanism for achieving them inconsistent, is true, but they nevertheless underpin the founding principle of the European Union. As is well known, with reference to trade and international cooperation, a commitment to democracy and human rights is vital. The European Union insists on respect for minority rights in peripheral countries and demand political conditionality on aid and trade agreements. In fact, since 1995, the human rights clauses is supposed to be incorporated within all cooperation and association agreements. And in 1998, the European Union launched an initiative on the death penalty and torture and raised the issue on a bilateral and multilateral basis worldwide through the United Nations. Furthermore, many aspects of the normative cosmopolitan identity of Europe are outlined in several parts of the preambles to the two treaties, and principally in the European Union Charter of Fundamental Rights. For example, the Article 2, this the core finality of the EU project. We have all the values of Europe in this article. Obviously, these documents do not contain such resounding ideals as those expressed in the prose inspiring the collective imagination of declarations such as "We, the people of the United States," or "Liberté, égalité, fraternité." Not this sound. At the same time, they symbolize an ideal dialogue which calls to mind all the great European values and cosmopolitan principles based on the dignity of the individual, democracy, freedom, solidarity. It's a pity, nonetheless, that the Charter is merely an appendix to the treaties, when prior to Lisbon, it had been imagined as a pillar upon which to base the constituenda institutional integration of the European peoples. Was this perhaps already a sign of an inverting tendency and anti-cosmopolitanism in Europe? Or was it the start of an institutional wage by means of which subsequent austerity policies and the walls erected by pro-nationalist states would have later prospered? In other words, has the normative cosmopolitan vision of Europe been betrayed? Emerging trends are disquieting, and the two situations I'm about to discuss seem to confirm this idea. Both these two arguments are the result of the economic financial crisis and the immigration issue, representing what I consider to be, and this is my final argument, the betrayal of the normative cosmopolitan vision of Europe embedded in her charters and history. First case, the internal social integration crisis. The first case refers to the internal social integration crisis and rise of market cosmopolitanism. In this context, it is well known that the sovereign debt crisis suffered by the European Union in recent years has produced a crisis in a supranational European solidarity and promoted more market as the panacea for all the ills of Europe. That is not to say that the market cosmopolitanism has entirely replaced normative cosmopolitanism. More than a shift, what seems to have emerged is the other side of the coin, which has always been an intrinsic part of the European project from treaties of Rome onward, two faces of coin. However, as of 2010, market cosmopolitanism appears to have had the better of normative. This kind of cosmopolitanism has highlighted the internal crack in the European Union, contrasting virtues with spendthrift states. Paradoxically, the outcome has been the punishment of non-virtuous countries by means of drastic economic measures, incompatible with the principle of vocation and pan-European solidarity affirmed in many articles of the treaties. For some scholars, perhaps the most drastic, austerity policies are not intended as fiscal consolidation, but rather as the total restructuring of the European economies and society within neoliberal framework. This, of course, clashes with the intention of constitutionalizing the European Union, the grandiose promise announced at the beginning of the third millennium. The second case pivots the second case, the external, on deceptive nature of post-Westphalian Europe and refers to the external social integration crisis. What is evident is that the European Union, while removes internal borders to encourage the free movement of people, goods, and service, at the same time it allows states to build more extensive borders around its outer edges. This further separates Europe from transnational flows of people taking place over the course of history. With these newly erected walls, the European Union is creating an additional barrier between communities and towns and is making it much harder for people to cross borders as part of their daily routine. More importantly, walls not only separate Europe from southern Mediterranean countries, but they also establish a symbolic borderline between Europe and her neighbors. This reinforces the historic and cultural image of a sealed Europe, in other words, a fortress Europe. This particular image of European culture and civilization, a strict division between the within and without, is the antithesis of a European cosmopolitanism, given that Europe is not a geographical entity, but a dynamic concept. Europe is a concept whose meaning has shifted over time. What is actually happening in contrast is that the political normative cosmopolitan vision of the European Union as an exemplary bastion of peace, justice and emancipation is descending more and more into the bleaker with the conclusion. Okay. In conclusion, despite the idealism emerging from the treaties and the resolution of human rights, the two above-mentioned crises distance the Union from the Kantian cosmopolitan vision, sought after by many. Europe's management of the crisis highlights her self-betrayal and also shows how debate on Europe is currently focused on her ambiguities. In the name of market cosmopolitanism, Europe, on the one hand, defends and promotes economy and market freedoms, and on the other, refutes its normative cosmopolitanism, depreciating and humiliating social principle of solidarity. A clash, for me, is a clash of cosmopolitanism that many scholars have already described. For example, they use other language, Europe as a normative power versus Europe as a market power, or a Kantian constitutional mindset versus a managerial mindset, or another one, a market correcting Europe versus a market making Europe, all in an attempt to better grasp the future that Europe has left behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Massimo, for this very interesting perspective on the role that EU should have at a global level, and mostly for underlying the relevance that fundamental human rights should have in this legal order. Each year, at the beginning of my EU course, I try to convince, in a way, my students that in its development, EU has turned itself from a market space into a space of justice, freedom, and security. But looking at the reality, sometimes it seems that it is turning back to this idea of a common market rather than a common space of fundamental rights. And it is useful to reflect on this. I think that another very important element is that keeping on building borders, new walls, you call them walls, could hamper the possibility of the EU to promote values and fundamental rights. So we should reflect on the balancing between protecting our internal space, but maybe wasting a true opportunity of improving the situation of the countries that are around us with the normative power that EU can play. So we will have time at the end of this first session to discuss, but now I'm very honored to introduce I will try to pronounce your name, but the true reason why Susanna told me to chair this session, it's because she wants to create problems to me, okay? Because I have some now that it's unpronounceable, but I will try. So on my on my left, I have Oleksky Kanjuk, maybe Alex Kanjuk, yes, maybe. And okay, I know I'm wrong, but shh, don't say. So he's a European integration researcher with more than 20 years of experience as an academic, political expert, and policy advisor. He is Walter Benjamin Professor at the University of Constance, and he has also been a research fellow in different prestigious universities such as l'Université Libre de Bruxelles, the University of Padua, and so on. He has worked with many NGOs. We can say that your expertise is mixed, an academic and a civil society and more technical one. And the topic of your speech today is evolution under pressure. How Russia's war in Ukraine transformed the European Union. So the floor is yours. I will give you this, Mick. And do you have a PowerPoint presentation? So you can skip. Okay. Switch.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's why I proposed to call me Alex. That could be easier for everybody. Okay. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's always a pleasure to be back in Italy. Thank you very much for the invitation again. And in my research, usually I have deal with the European integration and then the future of probable future enlargements and of course the role of Ukraine. But today I want to speak a bit quite opposite about how the war in Ukraine will affect the European Union and affected it now. So let's start to make it in time. So the last half decade has been more than reaching overlapping crisis in the European Union. The crisis occurred in very different areas, and it's hard to say which one was more powerful and had a great impact on the European Union. The migration crisis has become a significant economic and social challenge for the European Union, and sometimes even force the members to come out of Schengen Treaty and put the establishing control on the borders of the national state. The rule of law crisis, which was associated with a number of legal reforms, first of all in Poland and Hungary, The Brexit, of course, which forced the United Kingdom to leave the community after 50 years, I think, of membership, which also shook the unity of community. And of course, COVID, which is almost forgotten now, hopefully. But despite the problems and miscalculations associated with response to this multi-phase crisis, the final decision and transformation of the pan-European, let us say, toolkit allowed some scholars even to conclude that crises are indispensable basis for every transformational step on the EU path and institutional development. And only during crisis the EU, the political decision making in member states become receptive for further European integration. But you can see the basic concept on the slide, but leaving aside this certainly interesting hypothesis, we anyway must agree that the flow of the crisis has indeed significantly transformed the European Union, and its transformation is not yet complete because the war in Ukraine has become the most serious challenge for the European Union. And since the Putin's aggression, EU member states have made serious efforts to counter it without engaging in active warfare, of course. And contrary to all expectation, I must say, including mine, they have managed to create a system of economic sanctions against Russia, as well as a dynamic package of humanitarian and military instruments to help Ukraine to defend itself. And to my opinion, it is likely to have some important consequences for the development of the European Union itself. And in concept of the transformation of the European Union, there are several key issues that I want to address after Russia's attack on Ukraine. The first important question concerns whether the war in Ukraine has changed European foreign and security policy, and whether EU has managed to adapt to the new geopolitical reality. Can we? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know how to overcome this.
Yeah. So we can. Well, anyway, the next slide just showed basically the sanctions which was posed by the European Union. In fact, the European Union. Yeah, can I use it? No, no.
So we.
To the next.
Share the main screen. You share the main screen.
Here.
This one. No.
Pure questa la metti piccola. Fai tutto lo schermo, fai tutto. No.
Yes, now is online, okay? It's shared. you can go on without. We are having problems in sharing the slide on the screen. Maybe it's a problem of Teams, but you can listen to the presentation. Just scroll for yourself.
Okay.
And go with the presentation.
Okay.
Because it's blocked there.
But we also cannot share it on the big screen, right?
No, it's not possible. It's not working. That's what we are trying to do. I don't know why.
Allora, interrompi condivisione.
Yeah, I did it.
Ok.
Then I'm sharing.
This? Puoi fai tutto. Tutto lo schermo. Non solo. Includi il suono.
No, ma non c'è. Si è incasinato.
Possiamo andare avanti, tanto sentiranno l'audio.
Ma adesso neanche l'audio.
Dove stanno le presentazioni? Which?
I think you have to share everything, Claudia. No, not only one single thing. Yeah, try with that.
Do it.
Ah, okay. Do you want? No, I will do it. Let me just try. Yeah. Include il suono. Schermo.
It's worse. No, è lo schermo che si è incantato.
Apriamo, aspetta.
Che qui lo vediamo preciso.
Sì, connesso. Ma è il proiettore. Non posso dire. Riproviamo solo vicino alla finestra.
No, ma non c'è, guarda, questo non è collegato.
Ah, ok. Perché sembra...
Okay, maybe.
Forse...
Let's see if something. No?
Allora è due. Come hai fatto prima? Perché qua è esatto. Mantieni modifiche. Meglio lo schermo. Condividi lo schermo, Fabio. Condividi lo schermo con include il suono. Sopra. Sì? No? Condividi lo schermo. Quello lo usi. Ah, vedi, così, perfetto.
I won't touch and don't say nothing to me because I won't do anything now. Okay? Just go on.
And
Like this. Back or
and no. Okay,
like this.
do like this. Anyway, yeah. So we're back. Sorry for the break. So yeah, I mean, in fact, since the outbreak of war, the European Union has taken unprecedented step to use its collective might to punish Russia for its aggression. It include financial sanctions, including exclusion some of Russian banks from the SWIFT banking system, imposing of no-fly zone for over the EU for Russia aircraft, a ban of Russian media broadcasting in EU, at last, I must say, and finally financing arms shipment and sending fire jet from member state to Ukraine. And I must admit that there is something that the European Union has never done before. Moreover, may also will be noted here that the Russian aggression has consolidated the European Union in a rapid and unprecedented way. The EU has been a largely reactive state, or let us say quasi-state formation, but as a result of Russian aggression, it's becoming more and more and increasingly proactive. Another important issue is the question of European Union external subjectivity. In other words, how the EU is perceived and reacted by external actors as an agent in foreign policy. As you may see on the slide, 4 roles of the EU in politics have been identified in the Ukrainian crisis. The EU as a global and regional leader, the EU as a bilateral partner, the EU as a mediator, and the EU as an actor in public diplomacy. And while EU policymakers' own perceptions of effectiveness and efficiency are generally positive, analysis of perception of the Ukrainian elite shows a different picture. The EU is seen as a significant force in the economic and regulatory sphere, but as ineffective mediator, weak in public diplomacy, and virtually non-existent in security sphere. And I would venture to assume that we will have a quite same pictures if we go to the elites of neighbor, or let us say Eastern Partnership countries. And one of the main reasons for this perception is a striking asymmetry between the economic and geopolitical power of the European Union. The EU is the 3rd largest economy in the world, but it doesn't consider itself, and it's not considered by the others, as one of the world's leading political powers. And from that point of view, the EU institution development is highly unbalanced. It has great legal power over European citizens and businesses through the powerful judiciary and large body of laws, and it projects its influence internationally over as a world leading regulatory force. But however, EU powerful legal and regulatory powers stand in stark contrast to its minimal independent capacity, weak administrative tool, and virtually non-existent enforcement power. And finally, of course, an important question of how the war in Ukraine and related security threats will affect internal transformation within the European Union itself. The EU has come a long way on its path of institutional development by focusing on building rule of law state, but it is unclear whether it can maintain this path without a fuller set of, let us say, state powers. And while unfortunately there is no clear answer to the later question, but however there is a number of trends caused by the consequences of the war in Ukraine that can be assumed at the time. If I have time? Yeah, okay. Just a minute. We go to. Here we go. First, consolidation. What I mean by that is the mostly consolidated position of member states on the most foreign policy issues. Yeah, of course we can mention the exception of Hungary, for example, but I think it's part of a different discourse. But even the Hungarian government, which is a strong supporter of Putin regime, backed collective European sanctions, emphasizing that EU unity is paramount. Concentration. By concentration, I mean the willingness of member states to support powers of supranational bodies as never before. Moreover, even out of the context of Ukrainian war, the powerful crises that have hit EU in recent years, which I mentioned before, like migration and so on and so forth, have demonstration that the main reaction of national government was not to weaken a central government, but to transfer even more powers to EU in various policy areas. Next trend is unity. Go. Yep. What do you mean by unity? The Franco-German core and traditionally more pro-Atlantic countries demonstrate nearly unanimity in foreign policy goals. The locomotives of the United Europe, I mean Germany and France first of all, were more or less immersed in their own national project of European security before the war in Ukraine. France was nurturing the idea of this European strategic autonomy. Germany has taken more moderate position, but however, in recent years, the French idea of strategic autonomy has enjoyed particular support not only from Paris, but I might say from Berlin also. And this concept caused some tensions leading to split between those member states, especially France, who believed that Europe was ready to become strategically independent from US, and those countries, especially in the east of EU, who believed that Europe was not ready. Now we can say that we have very plausible perspective that the EU will be forced to gain this kind of strategic autonomy by the results of American election. But anyway, it was nevertheless the very important reactions of Germany and France to Russian military aggression, and it was such a fact and a test of confidence in Franco-German leadership in the European Union. The last trend is optimism. By optimism, I mean the weakening of Euroscepticism. At first glance, it seems controversial a bit today, but certainly in last decade, EU member states have largely witnessed the rise of populism, including those based on the Euroscepticism. But at the same time, even before the war, the example of the previous European Parliament elections showed the limits of this force's influence. I'm sure you know it without visualization, but nevertheless, here we go. So at the European level, all Eurosceptic groups, including those in mainstream parties, won about 30% of seats at the previous election. At the same time, so overwhelming majority of them are soft Eurosceptic, want only to return some power to the national level. That means that 70% of European political elites support the level of integration achieved in the European Union, and significant part of it's in the favor of further communitarization of certain policies. And the last thing I should mention before going to conclusion or something is, anyway, we can go to the last slide. The last thing I should mention is the case of Ukraine. It's somewhat unique in the sense of security. I mean, it is obvious that Ukraine won't be able to join NATO at least till the end of the war. And this situation has forced Ukraine to look also for security guarantees in its potential accession to the European Union. And the EU, on the other hand, think more deeply about its foreign policy capabilities and geopolitical subjectivity. In general, I try to wrap up already. In general, looking at the EU development from the perspective of sort of quasi-state building, as development as state building logic, and those circumstances we have with the war in Ukraine, it is encouraging us to see a large-scale, slowly developing logic that we may miss. Observing the EU ineffective responses to a number of recent crises, we can conclude that the EU has not made significant progress in developing the institutional capacity necessary to address these pressing issues and respond effectively to crises. However, in my opinion, the mirror conclusion would be more correct, that it is insufficient consolidation of power and centralization of authority that have prevented EU from providing adequate responses to the challenges of our times. And considering the way EU foreign policy has changed in the wake of war in Ukraine, I must say that Brussels has drawn and appropriate conclusions. And if EU continue to develop in this direction, it is likely have to face the questions about the limits of its current political foundations. It would certainly be naive to assume that the war in Ukraine will transform European Union into some sort of federation, of course. Not, but however, in the long-term perspective, we cannot ignore a striking centralization of power that took place even before the war in Ukraine, even in the absence of usually critical causal impetus of war. Avoiding here like traditional Euro-skeptic, Euro-optimist dichotomy, I would like to emphasize that this trend is, my opinion, the most appropriate response to the current foreign policy challenges and hopefully logical next step toward ever closer union. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex, for focusing on this very important topic and on the impact that, in general, crises do have on the institutional and the political development of the EU. And also for underlying the fact that we are recognized as economic power, as a normative power, but we still have not a long, but a way to walk in order to be recognized as true political power. Of course, the need for a more closer Europe is felt by large part of EU citizens, but I think that the outcome of the European Parliament's election will give us some more answers, because it will be a crucial moment to see how the war itself has impacted on the EU and on the trust that citizens have on the EU. So for us that are European lovers, you are not skeptical. I suppose that everyone in this room is pro-EU integration and for a stronger Europe, but let's see what happens. So thank you once again. We will have time to discuss later. And now we have to move online. I hope that everything will be okay. So next time I propose to have only in-presence events, so we will stay here all together. Let's move to Aymar. Can you listen to us?
Yes, thank you. Good morning to all.
Good morning. I'm sure to introduce yourself before giving you the floor. So, Mar Introini. It's an easy surname. I hope I pronounce it properly. She's a writer, speaker, facilitator, international speaker, goodwill ambassador, and a political analysis. You are so many things. So she has founded a blog, the Sustainability Reader blog, focusing on how to reshape the global system through a new political approach. And I'm sure that this will emerge from your contribution, the title of which is EU's Loss of Values, Following a War Agenda Instead of a Peace One. So, Mar, I give you the floor. Thank you once again. You have 20 minutes, okay?
Thank you so much. Good morning to all. Just a few words in Italian per dire che mi sento onorata di essere qui, anche una grande gioia di chi questo tipo di piattaforma continua, no? Costruire pace è base della pace è il scambio, il dialogo, e una riconoscenza a Susana Caffaro come leader di questo gruppo continua tutti gli anni a creare questo. So thank you so much for having me here. Unfortunately, on this edition I couldn't be present. I will be focused today on what I consider is a loss of values, on what is the focus on European Union. Mainly because we are based on what is a war, or an agenda of war. This war agenda instead of a peacemaking agenda. So I will divide my presentation in three parts. One related to what is fact. As a political, as a political analyst, I need to be focused on what is facts instead of analysis. And then we are going to go on what I consider the elements, the dimensions, 6 dimensions of what is the political crisis in the European Union that don't let to move forward into develop the European Union original values. And then I will go through what I consider are the solutions. First of all, as a political analyst, the first things that we need to focus on what is facts, as I said before, but facts are centralized in power, in an epicenter that delivered what is the facts. And from that, we make the analysis. So we need to go back. So let's make a reminder of what is European Union values in relation to foreign affairs. First of all, it's about preserve peace. You see, this is I choose this image that you have a machinery when you have to assemble, even if there are contradictions, even if one country or one institution, NATO, European Union, what is Ukraine, what is Russia, even small, doesn't matter the interest, they have to be assembled. So to preserve peace, we need to make peace. And now, when we are talking about Ukraine, the only political speech that we see that is delivered is about as long as it takes. So we are not trying to stop the war, we are trying to win the war. So this is the first aspect that goes against their own values. The second one, to promote international cooperation, it's indeed the work as a facilitator, as catalyzer, I would rather say, that the European Union have worked on the last decades. In fact, it was that region that was in the middle between what is USA and what is on the bloc, the BRICS bloc, especially China and Russia. So that was what kept certain level balance. And this is about strengthening international security. And it's indeed that the European Union have interfered, have been in sending armed support, military support to many regions in the world, including Africa. However, they did it in a way that could be considered more than a mission, a peacemaking mission, with success indeed. Then developing democracy. This we need to include what is the role of the European citizens. That I will go further in my presentation on this. What is the role that they are playing the citizens on this? And then, of course, rule of law and respect to human rights. That when you don't fulfill the values, the 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 values, indeed, you are not respecting what is human rights. So let's go to what I said before, facts. What we have so far. First of all, did you know that European Union committed 93 billion as a whole? It's a huge amount. And also, it's a huge amount the debt accumulated in the European Union plan for Ukraine on armament. That is from 7,160 million. USA only with financial and humanitarian support spent 75 billion. And finally, NATO and the alliance on 100 billion. Please bear in mind what means that and what means in terms of priority. So we don't have any unlimited funds. We have funds that have to be taken into account what we are removing from the agenda when we have this priority. Of course, this is response to a war military spending. From the New York Times, we see that they assure that we have 35 years. We have getting higher because of this spending. So we have 22.4 trillion. So an increase that reaching all the regions that have not been seen since 2009. So we have an agenda now. We have an agenda on military spending. And in relation to what is Europe, NATO admitted in its data NATO unprecedented rise in defense. So this, you remember, like 20 years ago, the debate about if we have to increase the armament industry. In 2014, it was from 1.47% of GDP in average. Now we are very close to that 2%. So we are achieving the goals of that specific agenda. But what is that agenda? What is the real agenda of NATO? It's about Ukraine, because we continue moving forward on what is month and month, and we're loses, and we continue on that as long as it takes, as Ursula von der Leyen reassuring and repeated many times. So increased military spending, that's clear. No, there is an agenda on that. More countries that join. This NATO had this agenda for many years ago. Instead of trying to develop a European Union army, the idea was to expansion of NATO. And we know that will have a crash with Russia, because Russia was determined that if they touch their borders, in the end of these countries, they will be a confrontation. So we set the agenda, and we have the polarization. We have now two blocks. So US, United NATO, European, the rest. So we have losing the balance that we have, but it was a balance in the end. Forgetting that what the real threats of that, what are the real big threats that we have to be focused and we have to invest, that is pandemics and cyber attacks, and not precisely war. So why do we get here? Why would we get? You see the image is the European Parliament with the European Union and the flags. Why we are supporting just one country instead of trying to use different resources to end the conflict? Well, again, NATO expansion. I couldn't avoid putting in all the slides that what is the reason why we get on that. You know? So we have an instability from the region. There is already instability before war that haven't been addressed. And then, of course, if we have this reality and we don't have leaders strong enough to say, let's debate, don't have to litigate, but let's debate. When we do that is when we make this exercise of analysis, we're going to see that we have a very important gap on what is global leadership. And in the end, which is the agenda. In just a few years, in the last few years, we changed the agenda. So instead of fighting far-right groups, we change it, and we start to have a powerful epicenter that is also a powerful epicenter in terms of information. The agenda is to erase Russia, not to negotiate with them. And for me, that is a fact, and it's very clear, more than just an analysis. And my interpretation is, allow me to say, for me, this is a political crisis, because they weaken what is our values. And when you weaken the very basis of what is the very essence of what is a common market that we're trying to have a system in the European Union, and couldn't overcome all their difference. And elements, a war that came from outside, so they clash. Enough powerful to say, let's try to see what is happening with the leadership. What is the strategy? Because we see the action, but what is the strategy? What we are trying to reach? So, with diplomacy, have we exercised diplomacy? They will say, no, they failed the diplomacy. Diplomacy never failed. And the European Union is the consequence of the success of diplomacy. So this is what has to be exercised to end the conflict. And for that, we need to negotiate. And it's easy to negotiate. No, war isn't fair. Negotiation is always fair. But we have information that we just don't try to analyze it, or we analyze it only on certain aspects. We focus and center on what only one information. We lost the capacity to exchange. There's no more exchange. We cannot exchange when there is only one position. And then we have the citizens, and I will go on
on the next slide on what is the citizen. What happened with Ukrainian citizens? What happened with European citizens? What they want? Because in the end, leadership cannot be up on a pyramid, in a hierarchy structure. We need to engage with the citizen more than ever to create democracy. Because if not, we have what we have now, polarization. There's no will to negotiate. So it's time for me that we need to search the status quo, that we search to the heart and see the values of the European Union and try to see what's going on in there. Who set the political agenda? It came from the citizens. Are you sure about that? Or it came from some political leaders or only from the European Union leaders? Or is it only? So where is the influence from civil society? Can't see it. So it's time for upgraded democracy because we are losing democracy. We lose values, we lose democracy, European democracy. And as they say, the leaders from the European Union, we are towards a war economy mode. So, but why we are going that? Because this is not the case. And Ukraine, we could support them, but not necessary. We have to change all our structure and become an economy mode, especially when we are getting out more or less from what is the crisis with the pandemics. So let's analyze Russia, this Europe, let's analyze Russia responsibility, Ukrainian responsibility, and the reason. In the end, we need to be neutral. The way I'm convinced that the way to move forward is to be neutral. Neutrality, it could be really the one who will make peace. So do you know that 1.1 million people flee from that region of conflicts to Russia? Because they wanted to be in Russia because of the conflicts on there. This is data from the International Federation of the Cross, so it's reliable. So then we could see the referendum annexation. And I know that it's controversial because it's not a legal referendum, but it's legitimate. We are here what the citizens engaged with a referendum from Crimea, and now there are over 87% that they want annexation. Again, the NATO expansion, they have to be there. That was the reason, the burden, the red line that put Russia many years ago. If NATO expand to the Russia, they will act. They say it. And in situation of that kind of tension, you have to be careful on that. And it's a responsibility. That's why the leaders have to call for accountability, not to be able to end the conflict. Because European Union is getting in complicity, not to fulfill what was the promise, not to get to the borders. So, and then the violence against Russian minorities. That was something that in 2014, and in next slide I will go on that. So let's see what is Ukraine responsibility. The fact of Ukraine responsibility, in fact, this is not justification of action. In fact, not justified. Of course not. But I taking the responsibility to go to war instead of negotiate. So when that happened, they need to be in responsibility. They need to get into responsibility, especially because the only way that they keep that action war is because of the support from NATO and the European Union. If not, it will be their own responsibility. So first of all, the neo-Nazi assault. Don't forget that this brigade joined the National Army. And Amnesty International in 2014 claimed for the war crimes against Russian population by assault. So, and now this is something that is not circulated, but this is one of the root causes to get in an even escalating conflict. So for The Guardian, Ukraine have become a far-right hub. And of course, corruption. The corruption in Ukraine had been in the top ranking of the most, the perception of corruption by Internet Transparency International had been claimed that Ukraine was there. Claimed had that Yanukovych era had bring of this corruption there. So why, under these circumstances, could fulfill the Copenhagen criteria? That in the end, this is the criteria to be European Union membership. So what we are demanding to other countries, we are demanding, first of all, achieve stability. It's not a country that shown that achieve stability more than our solidarity in a situation of war, that we have to be there. Of course, we have to support, but this is different. To guarantee democracy, how a country that include far-right groups in their international army with conflict region could guarantee democracy. There is a clear crisis on what is rule of law, and of course on human rights, because there was not respect and protection to minorities than the Russian population. And if we have this situation, we know, especially market economy, even that our solidarity gets to that point to include it as a long-term membership for NATO. So what are the elements for me that will bring us the solution? And it's the third part of my presentation. For me, it's the PEAP, Partnership for Peace. And seems to be an inconvenient formula, but this agreement had to be on the table. It was created in 1994, is still now, is there, even that anyone wanted to address it. But I will remind you, is NATO plus 18 former Soviet countries, precisely to avoid this kind of conflict. And in this kind of conflicts, the first things that was on the agreement was to consult and report to NATO. So as a way to control, not to have certain level of accountability of what's going on. So creating a cooperative military relationship with NATO. Instead, what we have a military action from NATO and not a cooperative relationship. And of course, engaging with humanitarian missions. How many deaths could be avoided by engaging on that region? So, Partnership for Peace, first of all. Second, citizens at the center. Do we have citizens at the center place? Because we need to upgrade democracy. And democracy, it's about citizens. Citizens have to be in the center. Have to be in this cycle of yellow stars. It have to be the citizens. And let's analyze the Ukrainian citizens and European citizens, and see why I am so keen on focus on this aspect. Ukrainian citizens no longer support a never-ending war. They are calling for negotiation. So it's not as Ursula von der Leyen or what NATO is saying, as long as it takes. It's not. They are calling for negotiation. They see it as unsustainable to continue the war. So it was very different from the beginning. In fact, the trust on their president, Zelensky, declined. You remember that Zelensky, in the beginning of the conflict, have a very low popularity. With the war, it rise to 84%, and now decline again. So this is something to take into account, because this is the heart of the citizens, and it's their will what counts. And the European citizens supporting this war, it was on the very beginning there was like a euphoria to support it, which is correct. You know, we can't invade another one, so the solidarity is guaranteed. Even that, now there is a downward trend on their support. But originally it was 55%, so it was a majority. So no, it's not the case now. Now only 10% believe Ukraine will win. And again, it's a reliable source in the European Union Parliament data that established this. And also the support to Ukraine, long-term NATO membership declined more than 50%. So we need to listen to the citizens. So this and what we need to restructure well.
One minute left, Mar. 1 minute, okay?
Sorry? Yes. It's the last one. Political crisis demands not political culture of organization. This is what will create an epicenter. We are NATO and European Union against. We need to assemble this contradiction, this machinery that I started before. And for that, we need to appreciate diversity, different kinds of countries, and different will from the different citizens. So to change the political culture is our next exit to finally rescue our European Union values and enter into a peacemaking agenda. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mar, for your presentation. Of course, you focus on a very sensitive topic, giving us your perspective. I share the idea. I'm deeply convinced that the peace agenda should now more than ever go hand in hand with the economic and military support that is necessary to help Ukraine. You underline the fact that citizens must be at the heart of the choices made at every level, but the idea is that those citizens, those human beings, because it is, I think, more crucial to identify them as human beings without any political classification, suffering the consequence of the Russian aggression because legally, I'm a lawyer and I'm a legal expert. Legally, it's an invasion, it's an aggression under international law. We must keep on supporting them without forgetting the need to help peace to prevail and to promote the roles that have been underlined by Alex of an EU as an international mediator or an actor in public democracy. And I also deeply, deeply really share your idea that culture is among the key, that we must develop cultural diplomacy in our relations. But at this point, we cannot left Ukraine behind. You have mentioned the accession process, but we can go on this later because I'm sure that our panelists and the public will interact with you. Now we skip. Thank you, Mark. See you in a while in the debate. Now we have to skip to another very interesting contribution. We remain in a way. Do you need? Okay. Okay. I'm not that good with those technical stuffs. I'm an old style, young, old lady. Maybe no, it's okay. Maybe it's working. Francesco, come here and help me, please, while I introduce you. So I was saying that we are now remaining in the field of Russian invasion to Ukraine, but now we are skipping the perspective from supranational dimension, I would say, to a more national one. Because Francesco Spera and Polina Zavenresh, I have to read it properly, okay? Zavershinskaya, yes, good. I passed the exam. Francesco is from the University of Salento. She's completing his PhD in European Union law with a focus on soft law and foreign policy, but very shortly, while Paulina, she's a doctoral researcher at the Leipzig University, the Institute for Political Science, and their contribution to today's dialogue is shared values under threat. How the Russian invasion of Ukraine impacted the EU member states' memory laws, the German and Italian experiences. So I look forward to listen to your presentation because I'm very interested in memory laws, because memory is another key element in building lasting peace, I think. So let's see what you have to share with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Morini. Thank you very much, Professor Caffaro, for inviting us to speak here. Yes, exactly. So we will focus on the cultural dimension, on the mnemonic narratives and how memory loss transmit these narratives about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And of course, the academic debate, it's not only agreeing with each other, but also challenging each other's ideas. So we are gonna challenge also the idea presented in the previous presentation about, we will try to argue that the peace dialogue is more complex and multifaceted than black and white, war and peace, right? Support or not support Ukraine military, right? It's, let's say, more values to that, and also it's regarding how you narrate it. It's of course the peaceful narration, but also the harmful narration and reverberation of Russian propaganda. So we are going to speak about that as well. So yes, and we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is outline of our presentation for today. We will speak about the general context about the Russian war against Ukraine and how actually here comes the European Union mnemonic framework and the frameworks of Italy and Germany. So then we will go to the theoretical framework. So we will speak about what we actually understand under memory loss, because it's quite, let's say, confusing term, and unfortunately until now not very elaborated in the academia, or elaborated from the different positions. So we will say our position, which theories we draw upon. So we will then talk about the German mnemonic framework, so how it was, how it formed after the end of the Second World War until nowadays, and the same with Italian mnemonic framework. Then we will present our methodology. We based basically on the qualitative and quantitative narrative analysis. So of course, giving the tribute to the sociological theories, right, we also try to expand that on the empirical dimension. And then we will present results, so what we found out, and conclude with some future directions, what's next after that. So speaking about the context, we all know this date, February 24th, 2022. It's the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But of course, sometimes when we see that in the media, it's presented as a traumatic event itself, but it was, let's say, culmination and escalation of the Russian war against Ukraine. Started in the early 2014, right, with Ukraine trying to build a relationship with European Union, and Russia is trying to preserve this its influence in Ukraine. And of course, this event, and especially its escalation in February 2022, led to the significant social and economic impact of the around the globe and in the European Union as well. So, what we actually assumed.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, our assumption is that the Russian invasion of Ukraine has an impact, or has impacted the mnemonic framework of EU countries, taking overall. There are already studies about the EU memory laws and literature is full of, in the past 2 years, of publication of how, of course, the Russian invasion, the full-scale invasion, 24th of February 2022, has already given impetus on the European memory policy and laws. For instance, you all know the Holodomor resolution of the European Parliament adopted in 2022, end of 2022, where they recognized genocide, and plus this has spread in every European countries, where mostly each European member state countries, parliaments, assemblies adopted the idea that recognized Holodomor as such events as act of genocides. So we took two countries that we know mostly we speak the language of, and of course one is Germany and one is Italy, and we tried to analyze, taking from more a sociological and memory law perspective, using method and technology, and Paulina will explain you more how she did it. How then this memory framework of Italy and Germany has been shaped after or changed after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So.
And actually, whether it was changed or not, because there are also studies, so for example, in the political sciences, arguing that there was no change of the paradigm yet, but because we actually research this state memory dimension, of course, we will present the results regarding this state dimension. So what is our theoretical framework? We actually departed from the cultural sociology of retrospection of brilliant Jeff Olick, and he suggested we argued that the comprehensive theorization of memory in contemporary societies. So, and what is actually collective memory? So Jeffrey Olick arguing that it's representations of collectively significant events and practices of their legitimation. And we argued in our paper that the images of the past and projections of society's future in the present embodied in collective narratives are mediated through multiple mnemonic instruments. And therefore we regarded law as a mnemonic instrument. So law defends state-sponsored interpretations of retrospective events. It's not only imposes penalties or particular retrospective discourses, so as in the Foucauldian words, discipline and punish, right? But it's also so-called declarative and especially what we actually found out, descriptive memory laws, such as commemorative resolutions or motions to resolutions. So it's, let's say, less legal perspective on this memory loss, but more sociological, because we tend to take also this not only legal acts, but non-legal acts as well, which are resolutions and motions. And so we argue that this memory loss, they have a twofold features. So they enforce particular visions of community, and at the same time are influenced by the community's mnemonic trajectory, as well as by the political and social dynamics outside the community, right? So it's not only tools, as some of the scholars argue. So memory is not a tool, but memory also influences the individual. We all live in the social milieu, so we have to consider also this culture and society over there. So what was the evolution of the German mnemonic framework? That's why it's important also to talk how it's evolved until nowadays. Yes, so we argue that actually this formation of the German mnemonic framework started with Nuremberg trials in 1945. It gave an impetus for the emergence of the European mnemonic framework in general. So, and scholars define at least 3 periods, and now it's they actually define the 4th period. So the first period, it's basically what happened after the Second World War. It's policy of, let's say, silencing and amnesties. So it was basically argued by, that the Germans didn't see the crimes perpetrated in the, for example, concentration camps, right? And they were just also living nearby, didn't notice that, but of course that was not particularly truth. And it followed by the amnesties against of some perpetrator of the Nazis regime, and actually some people who were occupying the places during the Nazi time were reinstated also during the first periods of the young BRD. So the second period is the trial of Nazi perpetrator Adolf Eichmann in Israel in 1960, and the Frankfurt trials in 1963, 1965. They renovated the debate regarding Nazi crimes. So here it's started to evolve this notion of the criminal nature of the Nazi regime itself. So it started to consolidate to the mnemonic framework that we can observe now. And the third period, it's actually the emergence of Holocaust as the universal event of, let's say, as a universal evil, as Jeffrey Alexander is calling. It started to become an integral part of German mnemonic framework, and we can see that in 1994, this Holocaust law appeared around the Europe, but also in Germany, basically regulating the commemoration and also regulating the breach of this revival of the Nazi culture. About the communist past, because it's very important when we talk about the memory loss in Germany and in Italy, communist past occupied somewhat a secondary place in this mnemonic framework, but in 1960s, Western Germany started normalizing relations with the, let's say, Warsaw Bloc and also Soviet Union. So it also fused with the German guilt complex, so acknowledging their crimes in the past and acknowledging their crimes also in front of, for example, Soviet Union, and also, of course, fused with economic politics. And there are also some issues after the reunification in 1991, reunification of BRD and DDR, so the East Germany. So what was the results? It translated into the German choice, we argue, to pursue diplomatic ways of resolving international conflicts. So, for example, facilitation of the Minsk agreements in 2014, 2015, right? And and it's not only about the reverberation of Russian propaganda, but this, let's say, pseudo-pacifist culture that we shouldn't intervene into the new wars because of what happened in Germany in the past. And here we will explore, was this pseudo-pacifist culture until the Zeitenwende and still something changed, or it's still some parts of the German society try to capitalize on pseudo-pacifism. And then, of course, the Russian soft power is Russian investment, for example, into the German far right, but also some far left, if you can consider them actually individuals. So, for example, Sarah Wagenknecht. And we will talk about that a bit later. And here, I think this is the quite representation of the German Ostpolitik as well. It's Willy Brandt, it's a famous Kniefall in front of the Warsaw ghetto, so acknowledging the Germans' crime of the past, right? And of course, like this amazing book of Jeffrey Oleg describing the German mnemonic framework and how it evolved until nowadays.
Yeah, okay. And now the Italian part. Well, so regarding the Italian and the evolution of the...
That this is the Italian part.
Yes. So now, what is important here, and why we are doing this research, and why I think also under Paulina's suggestion we included in a comparative perspective Italy, is that we believed that there is a sort of gap in literature on the Italian mnemonic framework, on the way it is addressed, on the way current debate is being issued, especially, of course, after the new government. And we believe that, yes, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has also created a certain complex debate in Italy, which can be also explained, looking on a comparative perspective with Germans, to our history, which has not been enough, I would say, debate. Of course, what we try to see here, something from the past, and what is interesting is, of course, we starting from the fascist past of the role of Italy in the Second World War, which has been different because, compared to the German, I'm not going to talk about history, there are better people for that, but of course, there is the famous armistice, and we shift our dimension as allied of Nazi Germany to a co-belligerent of the Allied powers in 1943. However, of course, as you know, Brindisi, Bari, Salerno, they were the first places where the Americans came, and the first, like the re-established Kingdom of Italy at that time was done. And then, but in the north, there was another kind of regime, of course. So we can even talk about civil war. I mean, I'm not going to talk about that. So that historical event has, of course, influenced the way that memory and debate on fascism in Italy has been pursued. So, on a way, what the literature on the matter presents us is neglecting, and this is the most obvious so far, on the fascist role in the Second World War, in colonization in Africa, and then, oh yes, and this is it's going to be a big point, of course, and so this image is in Brindisi. It's 2 minutes from here, and you will see it in real life. So a part of neglecting is to display it in Italy or to leave all this fascist monument with even clear mention of someone, and this has been this policy of neglecting, like, yeah, there was monument, there is something over there, but who cares? What about revisionism? Well, that goes in parallel, I will say, with that, because, of course, as you know better than me, what happened after that, the Scelba law was adopted. There was initially the possibility of a sort of Nuremberg in Italy, but then was Togliatti amnesty laws that create sort of lustration. It's called in the scientific debate, it's called incomplete fascist lustration of Italy. So in order not to have more civil war, because I think it's also understandable that people didn't want war anymore, a lot of people and a lot of people in power, starting from judge, public prosecutors, so important people in power, not just the city hall official, were left there. So what happened that, yes, on some point, some laws against those who perpetrate crimes were adopted. On the other side, the same people who should have judged the crimes were coming from that fascist regime. So it's not debated anymore that the rate of case that in the end issued a real sentence, so condemned criminals in Italy, were very low compared to the allegation of, and this has created the idea in our mind, in our parents, in our grandparents, of Italiani brava gente, of course, compared to the, let's say, the Nazi, the Germans, and the role, even the role of English and French in Africa. So the good Italian people, I think you all know that, right? Despite that, Oeschger law regarded the commemoration of the Nazi and fascist past. Then, as with the German case, so you follow us in our, let's say, logic. Then you have the Soviet past, where, of course, as you may know, the Italian Communist Party was the first, after the French one, or before, I don't remember, but with the French one, the biggest communist party in the West Europe, West Bloc, and directly funded by the Kremlin. I can tell you personally, the brother of my grandmother was a member of the Italian Fascist Party. Yes, I will. Yeah, and he was going to Kremlin in the 70s. So yeah, so even a personal history, family history can help us to understand how this influence was involved. Of course, what happened there? Left inspiration with anti-US and pacifist notion was created over there, because of course the fascists were left, let's say, on the negligence, whereas thanks to Soviet propaganda at that time and the Italian Communist Party, biggest one, you created in the left-wing culture atmosphere this inspiration, anti-US, and then leads to the pacifist notions, just to put it simply. So what we saw that was translated now was the left-wing pseudo-pacifism of the Italian political arena, coming from that Italian Communist Party, who everybody knows they joined the left part. The narrative about Italian long-time partnership with Russia that was left from this past. Then on the right side, we have the personal connection of some politicians. I mean, I don't have to mention we are talking about. And then even with that Russian soft power from Russia with love, all this campaign that are still ongoing, now we have this result. So yes, Claudia will give us 5 minutes more. 10 minutes more, so we can. So yeah, so this is the monument we will show you, and this is how we display our past. Because of course here, can you see here these pictures? Just look around. These pictures are from the First World War. You will not find picture of fascism, but fascism in Brindisi, in Lecce, in Bari, it's way present in everyday life. With monuments, with public. We were just talking yesterday, the building on power, the building of the Poste Italiane, so telecommunication, power and propaganda and communication. The buildings are fascist, and they are still used by the Italian states. So they are there. So we can somehow didn't forget them.
Yes, so also very important to mention that this campaign from Russia with Love, right, I think the one that are living in Italy actually saw this campaign, so it was initiated by the Russian government to help to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, and then we will see how it's actually translated, for example, like in this narrative that we should focus on the more real issue, COVID-19 pandemic, which was reverberated by Movimento 5 Stelle, and not helping other countries to fight their own, not related to us, battle, according to them.
Thank you for this point. I forget exactly. Sorry. You all remember that, during the COVID, only Italy allowed a military convoy of Russia coming to our highway and displaying in Russia the propaganda that we are helping Italians. No, even the Cubans came here. And it was the only Western European country who allowed that, just to say. So thanks for reminding. Yes, I will go.
Yes, so we will briefly present methodological framework because it's, I think, the most boring part of our study. So the country selection, of course, we weren't lazy to choose Russia and Germany because we speak these languages. Of course, it was also more nuanced, or at least we tried to cover maybe also this with more nuanced country selection, so sample selection. So it's scholars consider, for example, Chiara Bottici consider Germany and Europe the most relevant European political entities whose national policies have significantly impacted European integration. So we can see also with these mnemonic frameworks that we discuss. Of course, we can see also from what we presented actually how this fascist, Nazi, uneasy past and communist influence basically fused together and led to what we have, for example, now. So, like again, data collection, loss selection, we chose memory loss, as we explained according to the definition. we chose 36 memory laws, so 18 for Germany and 18 for Italy. It's just by an accident. We, of course, filtered more than 1,000 laws manually because, we wanted to see whether they reflect some kind of mnemonic narrative, right? And these laws had to have fascist and Nazi past commemoration and communist commemorations, so on and so forth. So, and we categorized also the mnemonic laws according to, at least like for Germany, to 3 categories. So the official, basically presentation. No, categories are here. So it's first it's called Ampelregierung, so the traffic light government presented by the ruling coalition. It's SPD, Social Democratic Party of Germany. It's Free Democrats and the Green Party, but also now oppositional parties CDU and CSU, which were more close to the official narration of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Then category 2 is presented by the oppositional party Die Linke, and category 3 is presented by, how to say it more in a nice way, far-right party, Alternative for Germany. So with Italy, we also categorized material into 4 categories, and we will present, we traced official and alternative narration. So first, it's right-wing coalition presented by Fratelli d'Italia, Lega, and Forza Italia. Second is presented by the liberal democratic parties and their coalition. Third category is scholars actually arguing they're still deciding their position on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, so they are still in this gray zone, so we basically coupled them together. And the category 4 is Movimento 5 Stelle, and it represents this alternative narration of the Russian invasion that Francesco will talk about later. So for narrative analysis, we used we used qualitative and quantitative analysis. So to support the narratives that we found, we also took a look about the collocations, the most significant collocations which were present in this laws, and tried to see whether these collocations correspond to the narrative that we defined manually. And then we present the results. So with, just put everything to the, so we actually distinguished 2 sets. It's official and alternative narrative, sorry. So the official narrative at side event and narration is basically that it's official narration regarding that Russia is threatening that the European peace evolved after the Second World War, right? And we should improve ourselves military, but also improve our cultural unity, right? That Alex was talking about in order to combat this threat of Russia. Then, of course, it's Russia's responsibility narrative was also present mostly by the official actors, but you can also see the alternative actors also it was present also within the alternative actors that Russia is responsible for the war in Ukraine, right? And here it's also, Francesco already mentioned the Holodomor narration, right? That the Holodomor is considered as a genocide now against Ukrainian population, and Russia, as the, let's say, successor of the Soviet Union, should be responsible for that. So collocations were corresponding, as you can see, to this kind of official narratives. So European peace order, transatlantic partnership, Second World War, German Bundestag condemned, Russian war of aggression, and European values that should be defended. So unofficial narratives are peace instead of war. As we can, it's very close to what was told in the presentation before us, right, that we should focus on finding a peaceful solution, but unfortunately, right, it's very much one-sided, I would say, representation saying that we should commit to the peace with Russia without understanding that we should also facilitate the Ukrainian self-defense, right? Another narrative is escalation. It's this narrative about NATO is coming close to the Russian borders, and we consider that as also harmful narrative because, of course, it's basically comes very close to the Russian side, right? I mean, Russian translation of propaganda arguing that we were forced to react on the NATO escalation, although the countries, so for example, near Russia, Baltic countries, willingly joined the alliance. And this alternative Zeitenwende was reverberated by German far-right, and this is essentially Eurosceptical narrative arguing about that we should, European Union failed us, and we should, as Germany, work on basically strengthening our society being separated from the European Union. So, and here we can see also the collocations. Yeah.
Yeah, very fast. For Italy, so we have this, the first set, so the change of paradigm, and that's the same like the Zeitwende, so for the categories, so we, how the perception has been presented by, because most of things are very similar to that, Russian responsibilities, the trauma, what we saw that there is this just peace, pace giusta, so the collocation is legittima difesa, self-defense, military equipment, equipaggiamento militare, aggressione, Russian aggression, and pace giusta, just peace. Second set, we have, and most of that are, as already presented, a part of the official Russian propaganda reverberated on that idea. And then on the conclusion, we really concluded, yeah, that the Russian invasion, I can. So the Russian invasion of Ukraine impacted the. So what we concluded on this result, of course, we will have more feedback, and we would like to have feedback from you. They impacted the memory laws in Italy and Germany, and the Russians sparked the high polarization of mnemonic narratives found in Germany and Italian laws, the official and versus the alternative one, so Zeitwende versus the Russian propaganda, the increased significance of narrating the Soviet and the Russian crimes when communicating about Russian invasion of Ukraine, the official one by coalition party, the Russian invasion of Ukraine as a commemorative event, a contradictory linguistic mimicry of the accepted collocation in their alternative narratives, operation of language to fit political goals, and by that devaluation,
Yeah, so quickly about that, we found like this Russian war of aggression, basically like this collocation in the official and unofficial narratives. So what we think that, of course, this is from the alternative narrative, it's apparelization of language. So they didn't mean when they said that this is Russian aggression, because like they presented that as Russia had to act, right? Like, but they still used the same linguistic, let's say, the same language, right? Yeah.
Okay, and that's just open question to everyone. Focus on exploring the EU common mnemonic framework under the influence of such external factors for not only national but European perspective and values, as we talk about values. And comparative study of society and their institution and discourse structure may help to articulate certain shared values within a wider EU collective memory framework and indicate points of contention. So this was mostly, yeah, and this grateful to the people who give already a feedback to our research. Thank you very much. Sorry we took a lot of time.
So I warmly welcome Alice Bijapia, invite her to sit here next to me. Thank you so much, Francesco and Paulina, for your very dense and intense presentation. As I told you, to me, the issue of memory is crucial, both for building long-lasting peace, but also is crucial for to strengthen democracy all over the world. Is an element that should be taken into account. I stopped your presentation on this slide because I think that you have underlined one of the most important elements that, in my view, currently is lacking when we talk about EU's democracy, because we do not have a truly European collective memory. Marty Grau is here in representation of the Jean Monnet house, of Maison Jean Monnet, and it is one of the institutions that tries to work to promote these EU shared memories, common memories. But I think that we must invest in this. We must teach in schools EU shared memories, because new Europeans should grow up with this feeling of belonging to a collective history. So thank you for underlying this aspect. And another personal thought that I want to share with you, and maybe we can then debate on this. We have been talking about past events, the results that they have, how they have been treated by history, by laws, etc. The impact of propaganda, of the current perception of the events that are around us. But I was reflecting on the fact that nowadays we are building the future memories. And so, this is an open question, which could be the impact of fake news on the future collective memories, of the AI. I have an expert here of AI. So how can we protect our future collective memory? Should we invest and protect more and more independent media, freelance, as watchdogs of our democracy? So this is an open question. But let's move to the only presentation having in the title a word of hope, the solidarity. Before you arrived, I underlined the fact that in each presentation there was a word having a sort of negative meaning. Yes, you're a minority, and we are used to protect minorities. So Alice Pisapia, she's a researcher of EU law at the University of Insubria, and she teaches artificial intelligence and big data. So maybe then you can try to answer to my question. We are now moving from war to another deep crisis that has invaded maybe our countries in a way, and that was the COVID-19 pandemic. And in this, with this respect, we have seen that EU's reaction has been maybe the good one in this way. So COVID pandemic has had one positive result, and maybe this will emerge from your presentation, that is about the solidarity principle as a founding principle of the EU in the health sector. So Alicia, the floor is yours, and thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you to the university and of course to the organization for selecting my paper for this time and sharing this moment sharing my ideas somehow. I will try also to, let's say, not give an answer. It's an open issue, but at least to provide with some inputs from my point of view. I'm happy to be here and to be the, let's say, the positive framework, even if I start talking about COVID, so which is a bit of a paradox. I will try to go shortly and briefly into three key elements during my discussion. The first one is just a brief introduction about the solidarity principle. Is this a principle or a value? How we exactly define these elements in the treaty and the primary law? Then, of course, illustrating the research question of the main idea of my paper, and going briefly to what has been application and implementation by the Court of Justice of solidarity principle, and then the most, let's say, innovative part, which is related to health policies. So how has been applied quite recently by the Court of Justice, and which could potentially be somehow the results, the effort, where are we going exactly? So starting from the first element, brief introduction, principle of solidarity. Solidarity, is it a principle or a value? Well, we know by the doctrine, Tridimas, first of all, and other professors, they define it as a core principle of the European Union. But of course, he has such a broad scope that somehow, for all of us, has a bit more the feeling of a value, of a founding value of the Union. Why it's so important, this distinction? Well, as a value, has more a political elements, a political commitment, and as a principle, it has a legal obligation. So, of course, according to the definition we give to this principle, then we're gonna have different conclusion. My key question has been, starting from the fact that we define solidarity as a general principle of EU law, and this can be seen in the judgment 6390 and 33509. So has been the Court of Justice actually defining with a jurisprudence that, in my view, it's quite an active jurisprudence. So sometimes we keep saying that judges in Luxembourg have become a bit more restrained, self-restrained in their vision. Actually, I have to say that I do believe in this area, for what concerns these matters, they have been quite with an innovative approach. So, starting from the fact that has been defined a general principle of EU law, and it's a founding principle as a core value. So starting from a core value, it became a general principle of law, consequently has legal obligation. And analyzing the application, the implementation of this principle in different EU policies, if we combine this with the elements of the Charter, which is obviously key element after the Lisbon Treaty, can we really say that this combination is somehow switching or pushing a bit the shared competences that we have been seeing up to now between member states and European Union? Because in the health sector there is all this issue where exactly it finishes the competence of member states and where it starts the competence of European Union. Obviously, this has been, at least from my point of view, a positive effect of COVID, which has pushed really far the competence of European Union. Member states, due to the emergency, due to the crisis, give up many of their restrictive powers and provide it to European Union. So my analysis has been developing starting from this research question. As for what concerns the application and the implementation, the Court of Justice applied this principle of solidarity mainly into, I don't want to say classical, but some of the EU policies. First of all, migration, for sure, asylum and migration, the energy sector, so the energy policy. Then it applied it to monetary union, so all the aspects related somehow of saving a euro all the time, making sure that the global effect of economical crisis, I'm talking about 2008, 2012 with the financial crisis of banking, didn't had too much negative effect on our financial stability system. So on all these aspects, the Court of Justice has actually adopted the solidarity principle and applied as a general principle, starting from primary law, going directly into these policies. Some of these policies, they have a secondary legislation, legal base, I'm referring to. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, but it could be wrong, the word solidarity, it's mentioned 16 times in the treaty. So it's relevant, but once again, it has a great potential in theory. That's my point. And has been often used, I would say, from my point of view, the farthest it went, the Court of Justice, was related to the social protection in the context of the application of the Charter. So there is actually a title, the vote to the social protection, and actually Article 35, which is about health and protection of health, is exactly in that area. So my point is how somehow primary legislation and the Charter interact without having necessary a secondary legislation in the middle in the health policies. So these elements, actually, was very interesting for me to read, to study a paper of Professor Kuzai, which in his conclusion, 2017, so before COVID, he was considering the external dimension and the internal dimension of solidarity principles, stressing more the external dimension of it, because at that time was more used for the defense policy, the asylum and immigration policy. And he was wondering in his conclusion if we are still there or we will be moving to the internal aspects of the solidarity principle, not just from the way horizontal and vertical aspect of the solidarity principle, which means between member states or between institution and member states, which is a bit the idea of coopération loyale, but it's, I would say, much more than that. And this actually happened in a court case that was decided in November 2022. And this is the last elements I would like to share the vision with you, because I think that judgment, it could be a turning point for really the application by the Court of Justice at the internal dimension of the solidarity principle, directly applying primary law and the Charter without having secondary law as a legal base. And this happened in the context of Russian citizens that was based in Amsterdam, and he was not resident, so he was there, let's say, visiting with a permit, with a visa that was lasting for less than 3 months, and he was having access to some treatment, therapies that were necessary to reduce the pain and to reduce, let's say, the terminal effects, the terminal negative effects of his cancer. This kind of treatment were not available in his country. So he could only had his treatment in Amsterdam, where he was visiting, but he was not permanently resident. So I would like to stress that he was not a European citizen, so this judgment does not fall within the scope of the free movement and does not fall within the scope of the rights arising from EU citizenship. It's a third member state, it's a citizen of third member state that enjoy the protection and the sanitary benefit of being in the European Union. And And actually, to me, was quite surprising that the Court of Justice decided that the directive, which in principle was supposed to provide member states the discretionality to reject the demand, the request to remain within the member states by the citizens, was dismissed and basically was declared that the person coming from a third member state had the right to request and to access those kind of treatment directly because of the charter, and because somehow, I would say, this is not said by the court, but I take this opportunity to share this vision with you, by the solidarity principle, to directly provide to him a treatment that is unavailable, it's absolutely necessary, and could have not been substituted by something else in its own country. And this, to me, it's really, reflecting on this, it's a key point, it's a turning point, because somehow said that our value and our principle that are established in the Charter, which consequently belong directly to primary law of the European Union, applies not only to EU citizens, but applies to all citizens, just because of the fact of being human beings and on being on the territory of European Union. So this could really lead to a new stage of the solidarity principle, once again, in a sector, in a domain which in principle does not belong to the competencies of the European Union. So, of course, we have to see how the court will develop more this idea. If it's just, if it happens just once, it's a divergent application, or if somehow leads to a new stage of protection of fundamental rights. My, of course, my vision, and I share it now with you, but I'm open for discussion for this element, is that actually we can really see that the court is trying to make an effort with the data protection legislation, with the AI legislation is still not applied by the court, but let's say this, to me, it's the general framework that they are trying to design to apply the charter and to increase the level of protection, not just for Europe, but as Europe as a global player in the world. And so to achieve a higher level of protection of fundamental rights, which somehow would have an effect globally and not just internally. And so my understanding is that I read this judgment about EU health and protection of health, Article 35 of the Charter, in this vision of increasing the general protection of fundamental rights, using primary law, so the principle, plus directly the Charter, without the need of having this secondary legislation somehow in the middle, which was very much needed before, because all the other judgment of the Court of Justice related to the policy, energy policy, immigration and asylum, they were referring to a secondary legislation, which were providing the EU the competencies from one side, and from the other side, also the legal base for taking action directly. So I'm not sure this is going to happen, but this is my, let's say, positive vision of the application of the solidarity elements. And these were the thoughts I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Alice, for your very interesting contribution that allow us to reflect also on the fundamental role that the European Court of Justice has played along the whole integration process of the EU. This is something that we try to teach to our university students in our lessons. So thanks for recalling. And for instance, moving to another field, but of course it is relevant because we are talking about fundamental rights. Last January, the European Court of Justice delivered another important judgment allowing for the recognition of the international protection of a woman coming from a third country, that was Turkey. She was in Bulgaria looking for international protection because she affirmed that in her country she suffered domestic violence, and so she suffered a violation of the Istanbul Convention, to which most of the member states are party, and from October 1st also EU is party. And the European Court of Justice has recognized that the secondary legislation, that is a directive allowing for international protection and asylum, must be interpreted in the light of this international instrument, and so expanding the effects of EU values and rights to third countries' nationals. So it is very important, the role that the European Court of Justice is playing in relation to fundamental rights, to expand its normative power in a way. So I think that now we can close this session from the point of view of the speaker, and give the floor to this very attentive audience. And I think that a question and answer moment can be open, but also if you want to add something to the conversation, if you have some insights, some critics, or just to say you were very good, or I don't like your shoes, whatever you want. So for those of you who want to intervene, I would like to welcome you here. I will give you this microphone, so also those at home will be able to listen and to see you. So. Okay. Yes, of course. The panelists can ask to the other panelists something, okay? And maybe also the chair can ask some, but I don't know. I will be last but not least, maybe. Yes. So Susanna, no, you are a speaker now. You can, Stefania, yeah, come. We have an expert in this kind of activities, Professor Attolini. She has just arrived from France. She woke up at 2:30 this morning. So she's ready.
We like the skills here in Italy.
For this.
We like the skills.
So Valerie, yeah. Valerie, if you want, you can also come here before the camera.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say that for me it was super rich because it really brought me to think of the technology of dialogue in the sense of in which quality do we speak? Do we speak as scholar? Do we speak as citizen? Do we speak as, person, like with conviction, with fear, with emotion, with rationality? And I'm not going to pick and choose one or the other intervention, but I really realized that the whole time, one question was constantly bugging me as a listener, was where from is the speaker intervening? Is it out of knowledge, verified scientifically, critiqued? Is it as political activist? Is it as passionate human? And I realized that my takeaway from this moment of confusion that I went through and maybe some of you saw I approach, because my goal is every opinion, even the most horrendous, are welcome to be expressed. Better express horror than fertilize it in your belly. So all fine, but what matters to me is to understand where from is the person speaking. Is the person speaking and presenting information as statistic, as facts, as knowledge? Or is the person conscious that I speak out of passion, I speak out of outrage, I speak out of hope? And this morning I got all color of the rainbow in my head and in my heart, because I had this constant hesitation. Where from am I listening and where from am I addressed? That's my takeaway of this session.
Thank you, Valerie, for underlying these element. Yeah, Wolfgang?
Since I'm in the audience, I want to stay in the audience. I'm closer to the audience, even physically now. To follow up to Valerie, I'm a passionate European. And that's why I feel very much challenged by Massimo, Professor Pendosa, by your presentation on cosmopolitanism. I have a problem there because you didn't define the word yourself. Cosmos, of course, is known, it's used in languages. And I didn't find as a European, 30 years in European institutions in Brussels and in third countries, the word cosmopolitanism in any law or any declaration, even not in declaration of the parliament. So please enlighten me, how do you define cosmopolitanism? Was first question. The second question is in particular the way you compare the EU to the US. I was myself at high school and later at Harvard in the US. I was at Brookings Institution. I have some experience in that country. But nevertheless, I feel there's enormous difference. The integration process of Europe after the Second World War and the way Europeans colonized the North American continent. That's what I call the USA now. It was a colonizing process of pioneers going out into the territory of the Indians, let's put it that way. And I wonder how far you can compare the missionary spirit of somebody like President Bush, for instance, for democracy in the world, with our rather relaxing, the Brussels effect. I mentioned that last evening to you. Brussels effect, the Bradford book on the European norms impact on the world, all the way to Japan, Korea, for instance, on private data protection and all that. Now with the AI Act, we have another normative effect coming up. For me, the problem here with this normative effect, since you use the word yourself, is we are not anymore the innovator to be ahead of others, to have a norm about something which we don't understand yet, particularly 5G, AI to a certain degree. And that's a problem for our normative effect nowadays. And I wonder how you see this comparison with the EU in the context of history. EU, US, they are quite different. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. It was very rich and very varied, extremely interesting. And I think you all contributed a completely different perspective. I think it would be very important. My name is Isabella Skanderbeg, Culture for Peace. And I think it would be very important, and I'm sure, Professor Morini, you agree to have a sort of brainstorming so that we all get even more involved with what we heard so far and try to reach some conclusions inside ourselves. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Manson from Sweden, Karlstad University. As I'm the only Swedish or Scandinavian in this context, I just want to add my particular perspective on what was said this morning. And if I pick up on Massimo's presentation of this cosmopolitan and now in market direction, from the Swedish perspective, we have had in the past a complex relation to the EU, being afraid of this fortress Europe and so on, trying to be more open to the world and cosmopolitan. But then in '94, in the referendum, decided to join, thinking that we need to be maybe closely allied to our European counterparts. Sweden alone is not effective on a global stage. And at that point in time, in the referendum, I was working in Saudi Arabia and decided to return to Sweden to get into EU institutions. So after this, I became an official in Brussels, an official in European Central Bank, and believed very much in the European idea. But I also noticed the gap between the Swedish perception of what EU was about and all the downsides of the EU I could experience inside the institutions of bureaucracy and not living up to the values. But I could not tell this to my fellow Swedish, because that would just reinforce their suspicions of what was going on. So anyhow, but lately I have noticed that Sweden has gone full speed in this market orientation. So giving up on any role of having normative leadership. In the last 2 years ago, I think, we had EU presidents, and the first time in history we had no agenda. So we're just hiding behind the facilitating, having no opinion on everything. So I think this underscores a bit your point that even if a country like Sweden that used to have high ambitions now let the market rule, that is an issue for the democracy. Thank you.
Personally, I would like to thank Professor Pendenza because, in my opinion, has tackled a very important issue on market cosmopolitanism. It is a process of Americanization of the European Union together with its market policies and together also with its politics that is becoming increasingly bipolar. That is something that is not that often being talked about or, well, not analyzed. As such, I wanted to ask Professor Pendenza if it is believed, especially with the new acts that were passed by the European Union, as example, the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act, if this is an attempt of the European Union to regain the normative power and contrast the market tendencies that are developing more on a social ways and also in an economic ways, my apologies. If this is exactly an attempt at regaining that normative power that the European Union has lost in the recent years. Thank you.
So thank you so much for those first questions. I think, Massimo, your presentation has been really successful. And thank you also to Isabella for recalling us the importance of brainstorming. And this is the opportunity for me to recall to all of us that in the afternoon we will have a parallel brainstorming sessions in which each of us can go in order to have a more in-depth moment of dialogue. So I strongly invite you to sign in to the different rooms. We will be in after lunch. So Massimo, the floor is again yours.
Thank you for your questions. Very important, very I was worried about my relation because I know this generate a lot of discussion about this question, about this clash of cosmopolitanism. So I understand your question. The word cosmopolitanism doesn't exist in official documents. Why? My idea is because cosmopolitanism is not political thinking, like liberalism, socialism, nationalism, federalism. In this case, they have actors. Who is the actors of the liberalism? Entrepreneurs. Who is the actor of the socialism? Operai, come si dice? Workers. Who is the subject of the federalism? The peace. Who is the actor of the peace? The political subject of the peace movement, probably. Who is the subject, the actors of cosmopolitanism? I don't know. I really don't know. We don't have actors. We don't parties. We don't have organization of the cosmopolitanism. So this means cosmopolitanism is an idea. What I'm doing with my work is I wrote a book some years ago. The title was Radicare il cosmopolitismo, embedded radical, rooted cosmopolitanism. Means we are talking about how cosmopolitanism can be real, can change from an ideal, from Kant, to act, to the social act. It's quite difficult to transform an idea in social act. It's quite difficult to transform a social. It's quite difficult to transform an ideal so high in a political program, in political project. So this is my idea because cosmopolitanism is not in the official. The Italian Constitution. You can recognize the printing of socialists, the printing of liberalists, the printing of. In the treaty, you can find the root of cosmopolitanism, but you can find who decided to put this argument inside. So the argument is we have to find actors for cosmopolitan project. How to help the normative vision of Europe, the cosmopolitan normative vision of Europe to come back? How to help this? This is the problem, I think. For the same reason, we don't have actor, but the specificity of the Europe compared with the United States, for example, it's a question. Of course, I use these two areas just to ideal type, just to put the difference. But for example, Europe make a lot laws, regulations for everybody, for everything. This is a problem. This is not a problem. It's a specificity of Europe because the neoliberalism of Europe is quite different of the neoliberalism of the United States. We have another tradition of new neoliberalism. It's not the school of Vienna. It's not the school of Chicago. We don't have anarchist capitalist. We are ordo-liberalist. Ordo-liberalism is a very, very specific way of neoliberalism of Europe. Very specific, very interesting. It's a very is a program. It's a political program. It's not only a economic program. I will say more. School of Friburgo is a sociologist school because they want create an order. Ordine is normal. Ordine is to create ordinamento, to make a law. So which is the ordinamento of the Freiburg schools? To create laws and rules for the competition. They want to create a rule for make people competitive. In economy, yes, especially in economy, of course, the first pillar of Europe is economy. But the idea of competitive go up, al di là, beyond the economy. In the school we have a competition, in the university we have a competition, in the social work we have a competition, in welfare we have a competition. So the key word of market Europe cosmopolitanism is competition, is the rule of competition. Create to make laws to make competition. Because the competition, is, the sociologists well know this, competition is not natural. Competition is not a natural competition is a construction of life. This is because the school of Vienna is quite different from the school of Friburgo. Because for school of Vienna, competition is natural. The men are competitive. Stop. For the Freiburg school, the men are not competitive, but you can create the men competitive. And this is the revolution. I would like to make another revolution, because I want revolution. The book of Bradford, Anu Bradford, was about the revolution of Europe. It was good. But which kind of revolution we want? We want, for example, I came from ideal of socialismo humanista, l'umanesimo socialista, social humanist. We have a tradition who want to regulate economy by the government. This doesn't mean destroy capitalism. It means to control the excess of capitalism. This is the Europe I want. I describe with my concept.
Yes. I think just to add quickly to what you said about competition and about the construction of the competition, it's also important to mention also Chantal Mouffe with the degree of competition, right? It can be an agonistic competition that we should strive, I don't know, like at least within the European Union, I would say. And there is antagonistic competition that it's more presented by the radical polarized actors. Yes, and thank you very much also for mentioning ordoliberalism. I think it's also important when we talk about the German collective memory. So it's not only, as you said, that economical principles, right? They are very much fused to the society. Right, and of course, with this older liberal development in Germany, we can explain a lot of contemporary frameworks, social frameworks today, including how, for example, the German far right tried to capitalize on these ideas and to twist them as well. Thank you.
No, just a legal question on the case law. I just really didn't understand. The principle of solidarity is not quoted. No. Okay. That's what interesting. Okay. So, but do you think that yeah?
You can read through line. This
Okay. All right.
Quoted per se.
And yeah, and on like, so we don't have a lot of case law, but do you think that in the future that can be extended to welfare? Let's say the same case applies or to other, let's say, policy sector of the European Union, if there are the basic, the legal basis, even if there are not. So it was against, so the case was about also going against the visa directive. And will be interesting to understand, so the methodology that the judge applied was the balance of principles from different, but following the tradition, a bit disrupting the same methodology. Then last was the Brussels effect. Yes, do you think that I think this Brussels effect is evolving now after 3 years of the Bradford publication? Yes, standard, but now we discussed this in Poland as well, that the AI, the foreign subsidy regulation, the CBAM, etc., etc., is more about enforcing with legal instruments, so not only economic theory, the legal norms and legal standards abroad. So we have a kind of, I mean, it's a mission of the European Union to promote EU values abroad. But in the book already was criticized that like somehow can be imperialism. So if we enforce too much standard, or it can be protectionism. So how this goes with everything? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your question. Gives me also the opportunity to clarify one element. Of course, there is a part of the doctrine that consider this pushing the limit of the shared competence as something very negative. Shared competence is one of the key principles for functioning of the EU legal order, and only member states in the Council can provide EU more competence than the ones they currently have under the Lisbon Treaty. So, of course, I shared with you my vision that has another approach, and the approach is the one of using the judicial activism of the Court of Justice to push further this competence that then probably in the next treaty will be somehow put into another, exactly as it happens every time with the treaties in the past, with the revision. So somehow the new treaty acknowledges the situation that has been established by the Court of Justice. So this is obviously my hope to achieve a greater level of integration in the European Union. And I do believe, COVID was actually the evidence of this, that without the integration of the EU health policies, we will not achieve this greater implementation in the future. So this is from one side. From the other side, this is what at least I do believe, I expect, is that implementation of AI regulation will bring lots of case law, let's say in 2-3 years from now, as it happens for the GDPR. At the very beginning, it entered into force, I would say, in a very light way. Somehow was a regulation, was just a new step after the directive, was related to something very specific, personal data, and then somehow it exploded. And it exploded because of what you said, balancing of principle, balancing of fundamental principle. And actually in this judgment, the way of reasoning of the court is not disruptive, it's perfectly coherent with the precedent case law, and it's actually a way of balancing two fundamental rights. And since the person in question could not get those kind of treatment abroad, and in the end it's a right of life, and it's right of accessing the only treatment that can provide somehow release from a very major pain, even if did not bring to solve the issue, let's say, because that kind of cancer could have not been treated anywhere, but at least would have provided a better quality of life for the remaining part of the life of this person. So obviously it was a balancing of fundamental rights, and the way the reasoning of the court was exactly the same. So that's why I do believe that with AI regulation, we will see in the future, 3-4 years, maybe even less, some jurisprudence of the Court of Justice that could use once again fundamental rights with the Brussels effect to increase the level of protection. Is this imperialism? Maybe, but when it comes to rights, rights are never enough from my point of view. So if the effect outside the world is that somehow for enjoying a more interesting market, so using the internal market of the European Union, you need to get a higher level of protection of fundamental rights. Then we really had the opportunity to spread EU values abroad on third member states. And once again, rights are never enough from my perspective.
Thank you, Alicia, for underlying this crucial aspect, that is the fact that expanding the effects of EU's fundamental rights is a mean to promote the global impact of our rights. We cannot ask for a global impact if we not do something to promote it. And I think that this case law of the court goes in this direction. Maybe we are living in this space of freedom, security, and justice, but the next step would be to have an open space. So to give up with the Fortress Europe and starting to act in a cosmopolitan perspective. You said that this notion has no actors, so the subjects are missing. In my view, I can start seeing the seeds of actors or subjects. European citizens are the seed of global citizenship. We have social movements all around the world that are fighting for shared goals. So maybe these movements could be future actors. They are asking for global responses, and so maybe they are asking for a cosmopolitan action in order to overcome states' limitation and shortcomings of their actions, maybe. So next generations maybe could be the subjects of this perspective. We hope so. For those online, do you have any question? Do you want to add something more to the conversation? Marti Grau? No? No? Marti? Thanks for staying with us. No? Someone else?
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you for all the contributions, but I don't have anything to add at this point, but it was very, very interesting.
Thanks for staying with us, and thanks for the support of the Maison Jean Monnet. We really look forward to see you again in Paris or here. Mar, nothing? No?
Thank you so much. I would like to respect your lunch here. It was so exciting to listen, to exchange, as I said before, and just to do that, what we have done this morning is a way to make it, to construct. So thank you for that. Thank you for the generosity on listening to others' opinions.
Thank you to you, Mar. Well, I think that I can close this first session. My takeaway, I also have a takeaway. We all realize that peace is not among EU values, is among the aims of the EU. So we cannot find peace in Article 2, we can find its promotion, not peace, its promotion in Article 3. And so I hope that in the next revision of the treaties, thanks to the tough moments we are experiencing, to the constant wars that are all around us, maybe peace could become another EU value, and I think that also dialogue could become another value of the EU. And last but not least, yes, I'm coming to you. We have mentioned, this is something to which I'm very linked. We have mentioned the founding fathers of the EU in our presentation. missing to recall, this is important for our common collective European memory, the role played also by the founding mothers of EU. So I'm here to recall it because they gave their contribution. And I think that when you talk about this competitive approach, the shifting of the paradigm may be facilitated by a more and more presence of women in decision making, because we have learned from another event that took place 2 days ago that women's approach go more in the direction of collaborative action. So more women in decision making could, it's not sure, we can assume that could promote a collaborative approach. So with this very feminist final sentence, I thank you everyone for staying with us this first morning, in this first session, and we are glad to invite you to a lunch break that will take place downstairs in the premises of the cafeteria. So thank you for staying with us and see you later. Bye.